Hey everybody, Thomas here. Got a short little video. We're going to talk about how to get your sawmill ready for the winter. And this is more geared to those who are actually running it throughout the winter. If you're following the channel, you know that we now live up in Wisconsin, but we've lived in other states as well and had sawmills. We lived in Tennessee, we lived in Mississippi, but what we found out is Wisconsin's definitely a lot colder than those two. There's been a lot of new things we had to learn operating that cold weather, and last year we had some pretty cold days here. I think our actual coldest day was like -12 with a wind chill about -36, and that was a pretty cold day. And I did not cut that day on the sawmill, but we did have a couple days where it was around like 0 to -4 and stuff like that, and I did cut on those days. And I learned some definite things, leading up to winter and then throughout winter, on how to make sure I can still cut and have a machine out here ready to go whenever I fire it up. So this sawmill has not been run in about a day or so, and this morning I think it was in the 20s, and right now we're about 40 degrees or so, maybe 38, 40 degrees, something like that. So not that cold, but still cold enough at nighttime to freeze things up and be a hindrance to starting off the workday. First things first, we've got this lube tank up here. This lube tank, typically people run water. There's a lot of things you can run everything. Water is what I ran for the longest time, especially down in Mississippi and Tennessee. For the most part, not a problem. Does just fine. During the winter months in Tennessee, yeah, you might have some frozen lines, frozen tank, but it's really not that bad. Here in Wisconsin, you can freeze that tank solid. You can bust that tank. You could bust these plastic fittings and stuff like that. All sorts of things. The tank is pretty robust, but at the same time, they're pretty expensive. I've seen people swap these out and put other things too, but you don't really want to freeze up your lines and everything else, because in the next morning you can't cut. So we don't really run water here anymore whatsoever. The only two things I run are diesel or BioLube. Now the BioLube, I've had this BioLube now for about a year or so. Got a 5-gallon bucket there. I've been running it for that the whole year. I'm gonna be doing a video hopefully here real soon where we're gonna go over like how well it's been for me. And let me tell you folks, I've been pretty impressed. With that system though, in order to minimize the amount of BioLube or diesel that you use, I also have this felt wiper system that my buddy Gary makes and everything. Now this is his prototype model. He's actually gonna be sending me a different model. The prototype model is black. The new one is actually red, and it has this felt pad right here. And he's actually sending me a double wiper system. He just came out with a double one too. This one right here is gonna be the only one that will get the actual, lubrication to it. But the other double wiper, or the other wiper, goes over on the other bearing over there. These things do a great job at keeping your guide wheels clean no matter what you're cutting. Pretty cool stuff, heavy duty felt. So first things first, during the winter time, especially for me and everything, we do not run any water. We switch solely over to diesel or BioLube. Another thing you can run would be like the windshield wiper fluid. I've heard people running that. You want to make sure you're running some type of lubrication. You can dry run a blade, but if you dry run a blade, there's a few things that could happen. You are inducing heat into your blade. There could be a little bit less blade life and stuff like that. But if you're cutting frozen logs, it's really not that much of a difference. If you're running water, and if you cut water into a frozen log, you will actually freeze your slabs together. Happened to me last year, so kind of interesting. So there's that. The next thing we're going to talk about is this gauge right here. Now, this gauge right here, you've got an oil reservoir that's actually here in the gauge, and this is a separate oil reservoir in the actual, I don't know what you call it, like the piston that's inside there. As that piston, gets pushed down, oil pressure goes into here, and it actually, there's like the small amount of tubing back here. That's what actually causes that pressure gauge to go up. And if you know me, go and you can see that moving right there. I run 1100 psi, so that's been like the standard. And if you watch my, trying to do this one-handed, if you watch my video where we go over the blade testing or everything, 1100 psi is what we run on the gauges, and that equates to about 17,000 psi on the actual blade. It's all due to the mechanical advantage in there and everything. And we have a video coming out later where we're going to talk about, different companies, what the pressure reads and what they're actually seeing on the blade tension. So stay tuned for that. But where I'm getting to with this is during last year's winter, this gauge right here, there must have been some other contaminants in there or something. The gauge kind of froze up on me. And I think I did a video on that where the gauge kept on freezing up on me. I'm like, there's something wrong. Well, after a while, you know, thawing it, freezing it, everything, I would take the thing off. It had like these weird clear crystals in there. I'm like, that's not right. So I got me some of this, I'm not kidding you, mineral oil, the same mineral oil that I use on my cutting boards and everything. You pop off this little rubber cap right here. I filled this sucker up with mineral oil. I've had no issues since then. Everything's reading nice and clean, and you know, no freezing and stuff like that. So just make sure you're checking what actual liquid is in there. I must have had some kind of contaminants in there, and it did not like that. Okay, coming back here to the control station. We're gonna go ahead and cold start this because I want to show you something else and talk. Well, I'll start it here in a second. We need to talk about what's going on here at the tank. So as you see, I use a diesel treatment and everything. There's many types out there. This is just one that I have, and you want to make sure it's diesel anti-gel, and it's also good for, it says fuel lubricator. It's good for the injectors and stuff like that. A diesel, when you're running it, has a return. So you have a return line, that is. I have my fuel line right here, which goes down to the inline filter, which then goes all the way up, and it goes to the filter that's right here onto the diesel engine itself, and then goes into the actual fuel pressure or fuel pump up there and everything through the injectors and into the cylinder heads. A diesel doesn't like to run out of fuel. No engine likes to run out of fuel, but especially on a diesel, there's always going to be a return. So the return comes off of there, and it comes right back to the top of the tank. And you see there's a little, it's hard to see, but there's a little itty bitty hole down there. And when the diesel engine's running, it will actually put fuel back into the tank. Well, when fuel makes it up to the diesel engine from this tank, there's definitely a temperature change. So this tank right here, let's say it's close to the ambient temperature. So right now, we'll say it's about 40 degrees or so. You know, it goes up to the engine, keeps on recycling back and forth. That fuel by the end of the day could be maybe 10 degrees warmer than the outside air. Why is that a big deal? Well, at nighttime, if you continue to burn down this whole tank right here and don't fill it back up, you have an air pocket right here. That air pocket has moisture in it, aka there's always water and stuff in the air we breathe. There's always some kind of humidity. As the two, you know, the air pocket and the fuel are different temperatures and everything, you get condensation. Condensation occurs, and then you will actually add water to your tank because, you know, of the difference in temperature, the temperature gradient. It's interesting. That's why during the wintertime, I try to make sure I always keep this tank as absolutely full as possible to minimize the air gap that's in there and to minimize the amount of water that I can put in there. A fuel treatment like this right here can help to knock down some of that water, but you're always going to get extra moisture in there if you're keeping this tank. You know, if you're running all the way down to the bare bottom and doing nothing with it, you're going to pull out condensation out of there. So something I really have never dealt with until here recently. Let's go and cold start this up real quick. So again, this has not been ran for, about a day or so. I'm going to hit that glow plug. And I do it for about, 10 seconds or so based on the temperature that we're dealing with. There you go. She's a bit cold, so you heard her spit and sputter there for a second, but she cranked up. I should have probably ran that glow plug a little bit longer. And see, now you can see that return fuel going back into there. So if you run that all day long, that return fuel is going back in there because it's going up to the diesel engine. It's going to obviously warm up, and everything could potentially condensate in there. So here's another thing. I do plan to use this sawmill here in just a little bit. I got to cut up a couple more cedar logs. Once I crank it up, I want to make sure I get everything up to operating temperature. So there's different things you can do to help on that warm-up process so you don't have to run it as long before you start going directly into cutting, one of the things you can do is on your engine block, the oil pan there, you can get a magnetic heater that goes on there. That's one thing. I don't have power out to my barn here, so it's not really an option for me. But if you have power to your structure, your barn, whatever, you can put a magnetic heater that goes onto the oil sump there. If not, you could also go in right there and add a block heater, standard block heater. You can get one of these block heaters for this V1505 diesel, I believe for around 70 or 100 bucks. I think about 70 bucks is what my buddy Gary did on his, and that will help to maintain your block temperature and everything at a very, nice temperature, even in those cold days and everything. So you reduce the risk of cracking a block or anything like that on those really, really cold days. Also, make sure that your coolant is of the correct type and temperature rating for your area. Now, my sawmill's not in direct, wind. If this is in direct wind, you could have an issue of things freezing up. I do have all my building structure here, so I don't really have to worry about, all those cold winds hitting it directly. But during the wintertime, I also will put a blanket or something around the whole engine on those really, really cold days. Also, really, really cold days, you run the sawmill throughout the day. What likes warm engine blocks and tight spaces? Rodents. I cannot stand rodents during the wintertime. So always make sure you run over your engine, check your exhaust, check your intake, check anywhere where a mouse can get into. That's a bad day if you crank up your tractor, your sawmill, whatever, and there's a mouse in there. Down in Mississippi, we had that issue. I cranked up my sawmill one day, not my sawmill, my tractor, and it ate a rat. It ate a rat through the whole serpentine belt and everything. In fact, I think my tractor has about 4 rat kills because of stuff like that. I can't stand the little bastards, but whatever. Another thing, you've got this oil tank right here. This is your reserve or your supply oil for all of your hydraulics and everything. And on there, you'll see that there is a temperature gauge. Another thing you can do to make sure that this is going to be operating at a optimal temperature all the time is you get one of those magnetic strips on there, or the I think they actually have some that are like you can epoxy them on or glue them on, but some kind of magnetic strip on there, or a heater strip, excuse me, that will actually keep it nice and warm again throughout those cold nights. I again don't have power out here, so a trick that I do, if I know I'm going to be using the sawmill the next day, I might bring the saw head further out down the track or anything, and then as the sun rises right over there, it will shine on that nice black tank up there, and that will help keep my oil temperature a little close to what normal should be. Another thing that you could do, I've already have my log turning arm up there, so you see the log turning arm right here. That log arm right there. Now my hydraulics are not warmed up. What my buddy taught me to do on those really cold mornings, he's like, grab that log turner, have it up there and everything, and then move this lever forward right here. So all it's doing is spinning that log turner. What that's doing, it's not actually under load or anything. And I actually have a little strap that I'll do. I do a strap sometime that goes from, it goes from this lever right here to this hook right here, and it will leave it wide open just like that. And what that's doing, it's making that oil go through my valve block here, as well as it's being pumped through the whole system. Everything is warming everything up. So if you're just letting the sawmill warm up, it's also a good idea to warm up your oil system, your hydraulic system. So just a neat little trick. In fact, I'll show you right here. So here's what I do. This is just a dog leash thing right here. See if I can do it on camera one-handed. I've seen bungee straps, I've seen all sorts of stuff, but again, I just put that on here, just like, I don't have it set to the right height right now. Give me 1 second. Okay, so now I have it set up here. All I do is, had to get the chain length the right length. All I do is I hook it on to something. You can do this with a bungee cord or whatever. I have this arm forward here, and as you can see, that chain's just turning. While that's turning, again, it's warming up all the oils and the hydraulic system, everything. So it's just going to keep on turning there. It's not hurting anything, not putting anything under load, but it'll actually just help to keep everything, you know, warmed up quickly, if you will. And so I can easily get on this sawmill right away, not have to worry about, am I going to overpressurize my hydraulic lines because I'm pushing cold peanut butter oil through it. Another thing that I like to do is I need to make sure that the hydraulic oils and the engine oils that I'm using are matched to my appropriate temperature. During the summertime, I run a kind of a heavier weight oil, if you will, and during the wintertime, I'll run a little bit lighter weight oil. Again, just making those crank ups and those cold mornings a little bit better, since I don't have a block heater on there or a magnetic thing on my oil pan. Also, something else I really never thought about is these guide bearings right here. These guide bearings right here, if you come out here on a really cold morning, yeah, try to turn one of those suckers. That, again, that grease in there, which is normal like peanut butter, is like, you know, solidified frozen peanut butter. So you want to make sure you kind of run the blade for a little bit at a lower speed, and sometimes you'll see it'll skip on there, aka the blade's going past the guide roller. Guide roller is not really turning that fast, but I like to run it at a lower speed for just a bit and everything before I bring it to that full speed and start cutting into the wood. So that's it in a nutshell. And I think I talked about this, maybe I didn't. So yes, I just cranked the sawmill up. I'm warming everything up. I don't like to come out here, cut just for 5 minutes and turn it off. I like to make sure I get everything warmed up, and you know, try to operate all different hydraulics on here just to make sure the system's operating as intended. But anyways, hope you enjoyed this. Hope this helped out someone. These are just a few of the things to look for when you're actually operating your sawmill during the wintertime. All right, folks, we'll see you around. Stay safe. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you here shortly.